Just want to say that I have often thought how different the world would have been had you rightfully been elected president in 2000.
Thank you.
I just had to say that. You know, I realize we all need to fight despair, in that it really is a luxury we don't have. But I also want to acknowledge the sadness that I felt watching the film at a profound level. When I saw it at Sundance, I actually cried a few times. And this leads me to my first question. Mr. Vice President, how do you remain so hopeful?
Well, Hope, first of all, thank you. And I want to thank the Jewish Film Festival and the Castro for having us here. And what you've just seen is the work of the incredibly talented Bonni Cohen and Jon Shenk. Haven't they done a marvelous job? San Francisco's own.
Thank you.
I know I'm biased. I said this before, but golly days, I've seen this so many times, and I every time I'm more in awe of their talent. To your question, how does one push away despair and find the hope? You know, I grew up a big part of my life in the South. During the Civil Rights Movement, Bonni and Jon captured me talking about that. The resistance to solving the climate crisis, as ferocious as it is, the resistance to ending the discrimination against African Americans in the South was even more ferocious than what we're confronting now. The resistance to giving women their rightful place in human society, the resistance to marriage equality. I won't go through all of the list, but we've been here before. And we have overcome before. And truly, when these seemingly complex and difficult, textured questions are actually seen more clearly as a simple question of whether we're going to do the right thing or the wrong thing, then things change quickly. There was a great economist named Rudy Dornbush, now deceased, a great man. He once said, things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen much faster than you thought they could. And we've seen that in nearby Silicon Valley in the technology area. I've seen it in the political and social realm. We really are very close in this movement. And the mayor of Georgetown, Texas is one of so many who are coming to it from a different perspective. And India comes to it from a way different perspective still. We're going to win this. We're going to win this. The remaining question is how fast we win it. And it's my great hope that this movie will add to the momentum that has been building steadily for several years now. And I put my hope in humanity. I put my hope in the ability that we all have as human beings to rise above our limitations, to see at times of crisis what truly is at stake, and do what is necessary. I see it happening. I see it unfolding now. I won't pretend that it's not a question encased in some great drama. It is. And the next few decades will be a challenge for the courage and character of humankind. But I believe deeply that we are up to this challenge, but my optimism is based on the assumption that all of you here and people beyond will be a part of this growing movement to rise and meet this challenge.
A question that comes out of that I'd like to ask. I was wondering if you could share your insight on how people, especially people with children and grandchildren, justify their opposition to fighting this climate crisis. And I'd like to know, just because we need to work with these people and we need to find a way of working together.
Yeah, we do. And, you know, at a very deep level, we have so much in common. And I've seen people who were on the other side of some of these great questions I've mentioned eventually see what needs to be done. I could take you to places in Tennessee where the opposition to seeing and experiencing African Americans as human beings equal in every respect to you and me was not present decades ago, and now really fully is. If somebody had asked me even 5 years ago, how likely do you think it is that in the year 2017, gay marriage will be legal in all 50 states and will be accepted, honored, and celebrated by 2/3 of the American people? I would have said, I sure hope so, but I really don't think that's very likely. But here we are, and it happened. Why did it happen? It happened, first of all, by the passionate and truth force of the advocates who were very skillful and who understood what Mahatma Gandhi described as truth force. He called it satyagraha. I'm probably mispronouncing satyagraha, but truth force. Truth can turn into power, and it has over and over again throughout human history. And when the most bigoted, prejudiced, hidebound individual finally allows himself or herself to see that the other is like himself or herself and opens his or her heart to the reality that we really are basically all the same, then everything changes. And in this case, we have to see that the most vulnerable people on earth are the next generation, and we have a moral obligation to them. And when we feel it as parents, as grandparents, as humans, then it does give way. I don't want to get sappy on you, but I really deeply believe that we have the ability to rise above our limitations, and now as never before we are called upon to do exactly that. And again, let me say that I've tried to tell this story for 40 years, and I count my blessings and bless the day that I was introduced to Bonni and Jon. That's right, I am. I do.
Thank you for that segue, because I want to talk to Bonni and Jon. An Inconvenient Truth premiered at Sundance in 2006, went on to win 2 Academy Awards. It was a seminal film, a game changer. I know that participant approached you about making this film, the sequel. I'm wondering whose idea was it to do a sequel in the first place? And if you, Bonni and Jon, could share your thought processes in agreeing to make the sequel. Because it's, you know, making a film after a very successful film is kind of daunting. I think you did an amazing job, amazing, but before you made it, what did you think?
Well, in July of 2015, I was sitting at a pool in Montclair, New Jersey with my daughter, and my phone rang, and it was one of these, pools where you're not allowed to be on your cell phone. So I saw that it was a 310 number, and I recognized participants' number, and I sort of ran out the gate and sat on the tarmac and took the call, and it was Diane Wireman. And she was calling to ask whether we might be interested in directing the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth. And we were in the middle of making Audrey and Daisy, which premiered last year. And John wasn't there, so I was thinking very quickly on my feet. And, it's sort of like the kind of call you get, you can't say no. Not just because it's Diane, who for us is, she's the bar when it comes to working with an executive in the documentary world. And if those of you out there have not had the great fortune of doing that, I really recommend it. And she talked with us about the thought process that she and Jeff Skoll and Al had gone through in trying to figure out when and if they would make a sequel, and it started to explain to me how far the climate crisis had gone. We knew a bit about it because of the making of The Island President in 2009. And she said, but the most important thing is that I want to bring on a film directing team that is going to have a good relationship with Al Gore and understand what he's doing. And I think the three of you will all really understand each other. And I'd like you to come down to Nashville with me if you wouldn't mind. And we were on a plane about a week and a half later. So there was no decision about whether or not we were going to make this film. After that call, we were on the road, and we never really looked back. We saw it as the great honor that it was to follow this man around, as you see the work that he does, the tireless passion that he has, and we just seized the opportunity.
So Diane is a great matchmaker.
Definitely.
John, your film is both of your film, but John, you shot it, and it's so cinematic. And I think the beauty of the images makes such a powerful statement on its own, because this is what we're losing, and that as you're watching it, you can't help feel that. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the challenges in the production and also in the editing of the film.
Thank you, Jay. One thing we realized right away about 15 minutes into the 10-hour slideshow that Al gave us on that first day that we met him in Nashville, he felt it was important that we had the long debriefing about what's happened with climate change and the climate crisis and the solutions. Bonni and I really, I think, had a sense that we needed to follow this guy around. We needed to see what he saw and see the world through his eyes. And we made a decision that we would kind of do a behind-the-scenes film to kind of, in a way, I think our first idea was, let's do a kind of making of the slideshow and kind of see where he gets his information, see who he meets throughout the year. And of course, we knew the Paris Climate Conference was coming up. We didn't know how seminal it would be, but there was some kind of inkling that this could be the first time in decades in the UN's history that the countries of the world could come together on this important issue. And then, of course, we had the honor of going with Al to places like Greenland, and this kind of strange thing happens that I hope comes across in the film, which is, you're looking at a wonder of the world, this kind of breathtaking, jaw-dropping scenics of, natural beauty, and at the same time, you're witnessing the infection of what's happened, almost like a viral type infections where it's kind of melting and falling apart before your eyes, and to be there with Al, for whom this has been a lifelong pursuit to keep this very thing from happening, that's really where we kind of took our cues. And, you know, the other thing that plays into it is Al, as you can see in the film, never really took a break after 2006 when An Inconvenient Truth came out. Every day the slideshow changes, his trainings change, what he does, how he applies his energy changes day to day. And one thing that became evident is the visual material and user-generated stills and video that has been created that are documented by people around the world of the climate crisis is also a character in of itself. So that became kind of a visual texture for the film. For example, that piece of footage where you see the exploding glaciers in Greenland was, you know, just happened to be a piece of footage that that a helicopter pilot had on his iPhone. And those things, you know, unfortunately are, you know, increasing in regularity of everyday people witnessing the destruction of the planet. And so we were able to weave that in, and as you say, it becomes sad, but it also becomes hopeful because people are stepping up.
Obviously, the Paris Accords were a big part of the film, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little, all of you talk a little bit about the ramifications of the pulling out of the Paris Accords by the current administration.
Well, let me respond to that first. I was really concerned when Donald Trump made that speech and made the decision in the speech. I went to meet with him, and that was not the only conversation I had with him. The dialogue extended into the months after he entered the White House, and I tried very hard to convince him to stay in the Paris Agreement. I thought I had. I thought there was a chance, a real chance, that he would come to a sensus, but I was wrong. And when he made his speech, I was deeply concerned that other countries that had joined the Paris Agreement would use his decision as an excuse to also pull out. But immediately afterwards, the entire rest of the world redoubled their commitment to maintain the Paris Agreement. And it was almost as if they were saying, well, we'll show you, Donald Trump. And then here in this country, immediately after that, so many of the governors, led, by the way, by your governor, Jerry Brown, who is a hero in this movement, and who got the historic legislation last week, so many of the governors and the mayors and the business leaders, companies like Apple and Google, and you can go down the list, they all said, we're still in the Paris Agreement. We're going to fill the gap. And it looks now as if the U.S. is going to meet its obligations under the Paris Agreement in spite of Donald Trump. We're going to win this. We're going to win this.
In spite of, I think a lot of things have to happen in spite of him. You recut the film since Sundance a little bit, right? I was wondering if you could tell us about that and what changed.
Yeah, so as you said at the beginning of the evening, we showed the film for the first time the night before the inauguration. And in fact, we showed the film during the inauguration at Sundance, which served as kind of a salve for a lot of people in that moment who could watch something, you know, positive, something that was moving forward. Because we didn't know when we had a finish for Sundance exactly how everything was going to turn out, we knew the appointments that Donald Trump was talking about. We knew that he was potentially going to dismantle the EPA. We knew that he was potentially going to pull out of Paris, but we didn't know for sure. And so as he took office and some of these proclamations he had made became more of a reality, and climate deniers were taking up cabinet positions in the administration, and the APA started to get dismantled, and then more recently he did pull out of Paris. We felt the need to update the film. Now, the film was 7/8 of the film was exactly as you see here. We followed Al Gore at a time, actually, as you see, during the year of the presidential election, and everything that happened at that time still held. But we felt that because Paris plays such an enormous role in this film in particular, it's kind of a lead character in the movie, we had to at least acknowledge that Donald Trump had pulled out of the accord. But equally as important, if not more important, we wanted to acknowledge, as Al was saying, all of the work that's already underway at the local and state level in this country and around the world to meet the goals of Paris anyway. So if, as it says in the film, if Donald Trump is not going to lead, we will.
Mr. Vice President, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about investment in sustainability, the relationship between business and the investment community in joining this fight?
Yeah, well, you know, between San Francisco and San Jose lies Silicon Valley. And it's the center of the venture capital community, and it's increasingly apparent that the entire world is in the early stages of a sustainability revolution that has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. We are learning now, we, the scientists and engineers and technologists, are learning how to manage molecules and atoms with the same precision that they learned earlier in managing bits of information. And the efficiency improvements are spreading all over the world. Companies are, particularly consumer-facing companies, are realizing that their customers want to do business with firms that share their values. They're realizing, all companies are realizing that in order to recruit millennials and the so-called centennials, even younger, that these young people want to work for firms that give them a good salary, yes, but who share their values, firms where they can go back to their family and their friends and say, I'm really proud to be working for a company that's about more than simply making money. We're also concerned about making the world a better place. That's not just happy talk and pablum, that's real currency in business and commerce now. It really is transforming the world. My partner, Colin LeDuc, who you saw me on the telephone with, is here with his wife this evening. And there are so many others who have contributed to the investments that have, over the last decade, matured into these exciting new technologies that are responsible for the possibilities for creating electricity at a rate much lower than you can do it with fossil fuels now. That's really changing the world. And the flip side of that, by the way, is that we have a lot of subprime carbon assets, starting with coal. The market capitalization of the global coal industry has fallen almost 90% in the last decade. Oil stocks are probably going to follow suit, and then gas. A former oil minister in Saudi Arabia decades ago once said, and some of you heard this quote, he said, "The Stone Age did not end because of a shortage of stones. It ended because something better was found." And the fossil fuel age is not going to end because of a shortage of fossil fuels. we now have things that are better and cleaner and more hopeful and more desirable. And the world is turning. It was completed. We spent a lot of time on India. They're canceling hundreds of coal-fired plants, vastly expanding solar. They just announced last month that within 13 years, all of their cars and trucks, the new ones, are going to have to be electric vehicles. That's amazing. Much farther than the U.S. has decided.
I was wondering if you can talk about the community outreach plans for the film. So,
Sure. As Al was just speaking, I had this thought, which is, us documentary filmmakers are often in the position of, building outreach programs and kind of hoping that films we make reach far and wide and do as much good as possible after we make them in schools with curriculum and discussions that take place all over the world where the film is seen. And I realized that part of the experience Bonni and I had on this film is we, in a way, were able to do a case study of a documentary that was made 10 years ago by going out into the world and kind of, in a way, having kind of an ad hoc study on what happened 10 years later with the effect of An Inconvenient Truth. And I have to say, the news was good. We met people who saw that film when they were teenagers and decided to go into a life of making a difference and went to work on, in Silicon Valley and other places for companies that are working on this very problem and help develop the technologies that Al is talking about. We met people who literally were in adult life and literally changed their lives, decided that they had to get a job in an industry to help make the world a better place for their kids and grandkids. Christiana Figueres, who was in charge of the UN Climate Summit in Paris in 2015, had seen An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, signed up for one of Al's trainings, I believe the second training in Nashville, Tennessee the following year, and then went on to lead the UN body that helped bring about the first ever world agreement in climate change and ending the climate crisis. We can only hope, and participant media is hard at work on this right now, of creating a film and a campaign that can have some of the same effects. Some changes take place overnight and some take place over time, and often us documentary filmmakers think in terms of time and things happening over a year, 2, 5, 10-year scale, and that's what's going on. There's an incredible outreach campaign being built. You can go to an inconvenientsequel.com, #BeInconvenient, and follow this story. Paramount is releasing the film widely, as Bonni said, on 500 screens on August 4th. We really strongly believe that in this country, one way that we vote is by choosing products and choosing to go see movies that we agree with and want to learn from, and we think that's going to hopefully happen in August as this film rolls out. What am I missing about the outreach campaign?
The partnership with Indivisible. Do you want to talk at all about that?
You all know Indivisible.com. Indivisible.com is partnering with us in the launch of this movie. And they're going to have a week-long major outreach campaign in cities across the country to organize around the launch of the movie. And participant Diane Wireman, who we've talked about, and Jeff Skoll, who has really changed the world in so many ways with documentary movies, is so solidly behind this. And there's a book of the same title, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, and both for the movie and the book, 100% of the profits go to the Climate Reality Project, training climate activists around the world. The next training is in Pittsburgh, not Paris, Pittsburgh. Let me tell a quick story that inspired me. When I was 13 years old, I was really inspired when John F. Kennedy announced the famous goal to put a person on the moon and bring him back safely within 10 years. And I remember when older people in that era, some of them said, that's a waste of money, it's unwise, probably won't be able to do it, why are we not spending the money on this, that, or the other? But 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And 2 seconds after that, when the signal reached Mission Control in Houston, Texas at NASA, there was a great cheer that went up. And the average age of the systems engineers in that room was 26, which means, among other things, their average age when they heard that challenge was 18. And they changed their lives, and they acquired the skills and the knowledge necessary to be a part of meeting that challenge. And some of you here know, some of you are of that generation, but many of you here know that young people today are determined to be a part of the solution to this. And they right now are acquiring the knowledge and skills to be a part of solving this. But they have a right to expect us not to wait on them. Time is a-wasting. We have to do this now. As Bonni said, go to the website, or John said, inconvenientsequel.com. You can take people to this movie. Learn about it. Don't be shy about speaking up and winning the conversations about climate. Use your voice. Be active as a citizen. Use your votes and tell the candidates and the office holders this is important to you. Use your choices in the economy. When you make the right choices, that sends a signal to business. But this is a 5-alarm fire. It's also a great opportunity. I don't know how to put it any plainer than this, and I know that many of you are already on side, but I've also seen how people like you in this audience can convince others. I mean, this is, it's the biggest challenge we've ever faced. We're going to win, but the remaining question is, how quickly will we win? Because damage is being done every day. We're going to make it, but the sooner the better.
Well, I want to thank these three amazing individuals. It was such an honor to have you here to show this film. I wish you all the best and the film great success, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.